I'm going to invite Mr. Yoav Fisher. He is going to share his experiences on building these blocks of virtual care and doing the seamless integration of virtual and physical in Israel. Welcome, Mr. Yoav.
Hello, can everyone hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Great. So first of all, thank you so much. This is a huge honor. A lot of fun, it's wonderful. I don't know enough about India, but we'll see how we can do. I'm gonna share my screen with you. And what I want to go over is what I do in telehealth, but I want to get about it in a different way. So first of all, a little bit about me. I work at a place called CAHOTECH. I am the Director of Healthcare Innovation. Prior to this, I have been working in venture in one of the VC firms that invests in healthcare. CAHOTECH is a very unique organization. It is a government-backed nonprofit. The money comes from the Israeli Ministry of Economy. What I do is I actually start with all the healthcare organizations themselves first, which is three. It's either the hospitals in Israel, the HMOs in Israel, or it's the corporate entities that have a physical presence here, pharma companies, device, etc. I work with them on a specific formalized process of understanding their needs and their challenges and how they operate, what resources they have, what they don't have, money, data, etc. Only at the end of this do I connect them to the solution, right? Effectively the startup, or maybe it's a technological company. And on top of that, because we're governmental, I work with everyone. I work with the Ministry of Health, the various organizations, the Israeli Innovation Authority, but I also work with everyone else in my ecosystem. You know, the incubators, the accelerators, the investors, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And the important part of this, because I'm a non-aligned entity, people tell me the truth, which is really important in healthcare, right? Because there's a very big difference between what people market out and the reality of healthcare innovation. Briefly about Israel, the beauty or the good aspects of Israel that everyone markets out is that it really is a recognized global leader in the technological drivers of healthcare innovation, machine learning, deep learning, cloud services, etc. Has a long history of innovation. There's a very high density of technological talent, but on top of that, there's a big infrastructure to support healthcare innovation. Governmental money, tons of VC money, some say even too much. There's about 80 accelerators, 9 government-backed incubators just focused on health, and there's about 45 multinational corporations with physical presence here. So there's a lot of support. But, right, there's always a but. When I look at healthcare innovation, I want successful startups and innovative companies to do 3 things, right? They need to improve health. They need to improve the workflows and processes of healthcare, but they also need to improve the economics, who pays for what and why. So in Israel, if I look at things objectively, and there's a lot of amazing, unbelievable technology, everyone wants to improve health. That's fantastic, good job. But these other 2 aspects leave a lot to be desired, we'll put it that way, right? There's very big differences between how Israel works than how every other country works. And on top of that, there's policy issues. So when we started out with Corona, back in mid-February already, we worked with all the healthcare organizations to map out their specific needs and challenges, because that's what we do. Prior to Corona, there were already over 1,000 challenges that we had mapped out, some big, some small, whatever. So during Corona, we helped map these things out. And what we got was about 50 unique challenges that were divided into 8 specific categories. These are the categories. And the little numbers right here are the number of specific challenges. Now, I want to expand on this for a second, and trust me, we'll get to telehealth at the end. If I look at just this operational logistics, these were the sub-challenges within it. What's interesting about this is that the bulk of these are actually not technological or low tech, right? Many of these things do not have a digital health startup solution that I can immediately say, here it works to address this challenge, right? Now, this is very, very critical. And this was important also because I think many healthcare organizations around the world were facing the exact same amount of things. So this created kind of a disconnect, right? So if I look at the challenges before Corona and then during the peak of February, March, and April, before there were a lot of challenges that were being addressed, some not. There was workforce in process, healthcare economics issues, as I said. But during, there were many needs and challenges that were actually not related to startups or not related to technology. Certain key ones I could find a solution for in Israel or abroad. But the other thing is that all these workflow and processes were kind of pushed aside, right? The healthcare organizations were willing to just try stuff and no one really cared about the money, right? A lot of startups were even willing to work pro bono and delay the conversation of who's going to pay for this till the future. So what about now? Things in Israel quieted down in May and June. This gave the healthcare organizations themselves time to stock up on PPE and time to kind of get into this routine, this COVID-19 routine, we'll say. And the challenges and needs changed accordingly. So if during the crisis mode of February, March, and April, it was all about PPE and safety and procurement and equipment, detection and screening. Now we're seeing a shift in these challenges to this, right? There's a lot about the continuum of care, which is going to be the new norm, right? This is where telehealth and remote medicine come in. But there's a lot of questions about ongoing management, supply chain, logistics, administration, and operation, things like intra-organizational communications. These are all things that are emerging, and there's not necessarily startups that can address it well. And the other thing is population health, specifically for at-risk and chronic patients. This is also where telehealth comes in. So all of these challenges also create opportunities for startups, right? There's a lot of unknown. There's a lot of question marks about who's going to pay for these things, what the regulation is going to be, coding, reimbursement, etc. But there's a lot of opportunities here, especially for telehealth, which is going to be critical for this future. So now I want to bring it in and talk about telehealth over this perspective. So before, in the periods of, up till February, there was quite a lot of telehealth and remote medicine in Israel. It was based on two basic things. One was apps, right? Every HMO in Israel has a wonderful application on their cell phone. I can schedule appointments. I can look at lab results. Some even are able to have a chat with a nurse, but there was also, the on-call to help with scheduling, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. This has been around for many years in Israel, and it's doing quite well. So during that peak, February, March, and April, what happened was the exact same thing, but with WhatsApp, right? WhatsApp became the go-to tool for healthcare in Israel during those 3 months. Now, what's interesting about this is that WhatsApp is not compliant. It's not HIPAA compliant. It's not GDPR compliant. It's not secure for healthcare information, but it was used constantly. And the question is, where were the startups? So for those who know Israel a little bit, there's a ton of unbelievable startups that are targeting remote care. You may know some of these names. Tydo Care is a big one, but also companies like BioBeat and Oxytone. And some of these companies are also even FDA approved also. And the question is, where were they? We have all this technology. Why wasn't this being used? And the answer was that it was, but in a very, very, very small amount. So the question is, why wasn't this rolled out? And the answer has been alluded to by everyone who spoke before me. And the answer is an infrastructure problem. And I say infrastructure in a very broad sense. Part of it is the telecom. Part of it is the ability to integrate the data into the care provider. Part of it is the adoption, not just with the users themselves, but also with the care providers themselves. All of these issues, part of it's from the perspective of the startup, right? The fact that Tydo Care exists does not mean that they have 8 million units ready to go. So all of these things were on the large scale of infrastructure. What emerged in Israel is that the solutions are there, the technology is there, the infrastructure is not there. So what's going to happen in the future? This is what's going on. Israel has just, as of last week, announced 1.1 billion shekels, that's about $250 million, more or less, for this infrastructure to scale and build out and create this. So I want to tie this back in to you guys. I don't know enough about India, but I do know that there is a big push for access at the national level. I also know that you have a telecom infrastructure that is very robust. All of these things can create the opportunities, but again, you need to spend a lot of time understanding the challenges of the infrastructure of building out telehealth in order to maximize the potential of this. Thank you so much. This was really wonderful. And if there's any questions, feel free.